Hi, this is Phil McCauley for Labour Business TV. And today I'm really proud and delighted to be welcoming one of the great heroes of the Labour Party, personal hero for me, Crispin Flintoff, the person behind Stand Up for Labour and many other things. Crispin, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Phil. I'm okay, considering I've not slept very much with my 2-year-old.
It's another lockdown nightmare, isn't it, as well for you? How are you coping generally before we get into our discussion?
I'm doing quite well because I'm putting on shows twice a week to keep me occupied and meeting more people through Zoom in a way than I was doing shows out there on the road.
So one of the upsides has been the new Zoom economy that we all seem to be experiencing. How's that been for people watching the shows?
It's been fantastic. I've done a couple of shows where we've had more people register than could actually be in the Zoom meeting. Wow. And the feedback's been positive as well. I mean, I've deliberately made the Zoom shows more, how do you put it, chaotic than other channels, because I like the idea that everyone can see each other. And if there's 1,000 people, you can just scroll through seeing different faces. It's more fun than just two people like us talking to each other. They can watch us talking. I prefer the sort of it feels more grassroots to let more people be involved in the Zoom experience. Really,
I completely agree. Now let's just take everybody back, because it's about, wasn't 2012 or so, I think, when you first envisioned and set up Stand Up for Labour. How did it come about? What was your run into that and your thinking as an activist?
Well, I went to Labour Party meetings locally, like the branch meeting and then the GC meeting, and I just thought that there was so little interest there. The business structure of the meetings was boring, and then the social events were kind of expensive dinners or quiz night, I think, was about the alternative to that. And I didn't think it was a very good way of enticing people to stay in the party, or maybe connecting with people outside the party. And I'd done stand-up comedy before I joined the party, and I had run a small club in Fulham. So I thought, I'll put a comedy night on. And everyone in the CLP said, "Okay, go on then." They didn't say, "How can we help you?" They said, "Go on then." So I ran around finding acts, promoting, making flyers, putting them up every post office, cab office, laundrette, everywhere in West London. And eventually we got sort of 100 people in this club, and they watched and thought it wasn't too bad, and they laughed a bit. So I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I did it again. I did it 4 times for my constituency, and then people outside my constituency asked me to do it for their CLP. So I took up that challenge. I did ones in Bath. I did one in Corby for the by-election they had there, and then I just went into overdrive, and sort of 50 in a year became quite common until 2015, and then I thought I'd stop, because I thought I'd stop in 2015 when we got into government, but we didn't. And then Jeremy Corbyn's campaign took hold, and people got really excited about politics. So I thought I'd try and be part of that. And also I knew Jeremy Corbyn would face a lot of media attacks. So I thought, if we could build grassroots shows that promoted Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party and the new Labour philosophy that he had put forward, then we might be able to weather that storm in some way. I mean, obviously not totally, but it would help. So I put on shows that I'd never dreamed of doing. 1,800 people in Bristol, 3,000 people in Bournemouth. I was doing at the beginning, like I say, 100 people was a good turnout. Went to a conference, and I did like 400 people in I started to think 400 people in a show audience was just small, and I carried on doing that, and I still didn't get any support from the party throughout that time. So right up until last year, I've still had not a penny. In fact, that I actually have had to pay the party more than they've given me. I paid to have a stall at the conference one year, and they asked me for £1,800 to do that. And all I was doing was promoting Stand Up for Labour and trying to fund CLPs, and they were asking me to pay them for that. The party also nicked my name one time. They called a show Stand Up for Labour, and I said, you can't call it that. So they called it Stand Up with Labour. They changed one word. So I haven't had a good relationship with the central party, and I don't really understand why, except possibly that they want to be in control of how things are, and they don't trust someone doing it who isn't an employee. I don't know.
But on the other hand, I mean, look, I think your record of achievement is outstanding as a Labour activist, and congratulations, and thank you, certainly from my point of view, for everything that you do. Your show's great. It brings people together, and it really does galvanise a sense of spirit around the party, and I love what you do. Now, as we move into the new era, and we have Keir Starmer and his new shadow cabinet team in place, David Evans coming in as the new General Secretary, what would be a good outcome for Stand Up for Labour in terms of going forward? How could the party put right what you just described and work more profitably together with you?
Well, I think the party has to change fundamentally. It can't win. I don't think the party can win elections again until it changes its spirit and its energy. And I mean by that, the top-down managerial style is not going to defeat the Conservatives. It's almost like you can't beat the Conservatives at their own game. That's their strong point, is top-down managerial politics. Labour has to have a different energy that will defeat that. And that would be grassroots, on the very localised campaigning, which would would give resources to local parties instead of giving resources to the central party. So, I mean, I've made a bit of a hoo-ha about this recently, but the thing is, when you look at where the money goes from subscriptions, it's a ridiculous bar graph. The central party it's not a percentage. They get, say, £47, and the local party get £2.50 a year. So the central party get £47, and the local party get £2.50. That's for a full fee, a standard rate of membership. That, to me, is just grotesque. If we're talking about being a Labour Party that believes in devolving power to local communities and empowering people to make decisions locally, that isn't the way you do it. And I think that's partly, I think Stand Up for Labour would work best if local parties had the resources, because a lot of them can't afford to put the money up for a show. So if I say that, I mean, I pay all the acts, I have to pay the acts, it's a job. They're going out of their way. Some of them are travelling hundreds of miles to get to a show. If I ask a local party to pay for their performance, and also for a fee to me, and for the covering the costs of the flyers and all that stuff, it's a few £100. If they haven't got that money, they won't do it. So they won't have any shows. And if the central party won't fund it, then the shows just won't happen. So whereas if the local CLPs all had 50% of their members' subscription fees, so for example, there were 1,000 members, they'd have £25,000 a year. I mean, there may well be some reductions on that, but £25,000 to spend locally would be fantastic. And they could invest in putting on shows. They could invest in helping food banks. They could invest in all kinds of, they can have a hub, a community hub. I mean, there's like you say, you were speaking earlier about Nottinghamshire. I mean, there's that hub in Broxtowe.
Yeah.
They've got a food bank in Broxtowe. If every CLP had a food bank and was collecting for people who are really struggling in this depression that's going to happen, the Labour Party would not just be talking about what we've got to do, they'd be doing things. They'd be actually doing things. And the problem I think Labour's had in the past for quite a long time is they talk a lot about what we should do, but they don't seem to do anything.
So talking, not doing is your key message. And of course, Angela Rayner has come in as deputy leader, and part of her remit as chair of the party is to look at party structure, organisation, and all of that. And what's your message to her as she starts to think about this now going forward?
Well, I would say to her that it obviously looks comfortable from an office in London, and it looks like you've got everything under your control with all these people running around with charts saying we can do this, we can do that. But what really needs to happen is we need to have people in every constituency resourced and able to fund support for local people. Take away the big offices, take away the luxuries of the Labour Party that we've had for a few decades now, and put that money back where it was. I mean, the other thing is, I have to say, the Labour Party was formed by local parties and who set up things like clubs and social clubs that people could all go to. And those local parties then thought, well, let's actually get together and set up a national party. So it actually started from a grassroots, local-based political activity to a national party that is now taken over. It's taken over what it was originally meant to be about. I mean, Labour was meant to be on the ground. The Conservatives, just another point, the Conservatives have a lot of local association clubs with social groups, social activities going on. There's one in Oxford near me. There's a few around here. They keep their members connected socially, and we're not doing that.
So this is a big opportunity for Labour to revisit keeping those connections. Just on a wider point, because I mean, I've been to several of your shows recently, which has just been great and really insightful and funny and full of a whole wide range of emotional responses for me as a lifelong Labour Party member. My question to you is a deeper one. What is the role of satire and humour in politics?
Well, I mean, my idea of a good night out is a mix of all emotions, where you may well have serious, heartbreaking content from a speech. But at the same time, you would have something that would make you laugh, something that would make you angry, something that human beings need to have all kinds of expression. And sometimes politics is far too one-dimensional. The messages are very, it's not dull. Dull isn't really the word, but it's just they don't connect. They don't connect. As human beings, we have to express ourselves in a multitude of ways, and that's what makes us human. And sometimes we lose that. And humour is not something to run away from if we're in politics. Humour is something that, for example, Boris Johnson is using all the time. And if Labour think that that's childish or something, it only reflects badly on us. We should have humour as well. We should be able to laugh at him, laugh at ourselves, and show people that we are, we're not just trying to sell a message. We're human beings. We express ourselves in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And thinking about the next few years ahead, leading up to the next general election, I completely agree with you about refocusing attention and resources locally and having an organised campaign. Tell me this, in this post sort of pandemic almost era that we're in now, and everyone's gone on to Zoom and they're doing this kind of thing, what part can digital play in connecting the Labour base and bringing it together?
Well, I think the potentials are great, because if you connect people, if people become used to using social media and Zoom, then we can get the message across better. We can connect better. I mean, a lot of it is to do with people's spirits. If people are isolated and they don't feel that they have a community around them, then they won't feel the need to fight and campaign and do stuff. If they know that they've got access to other people who will support them and be supportive, then they'll probably take up more campaigning. But a lot of politics is about keeping your spirits up. How many times have people got up and thought, I can't do this anymore. This is too much. I'm not going out campaigning for Labour. Look at what he just said on the telly. That Labour politician didn't say it exactly how I'd like them to have said it, or etc. We have to keep our spirits up as much as our physical and mental health. It's our spirit is so important, and people don't understand that. I mean, I know personally that if I'm in a bad spirit, I don't want to do anything. So we have to connect, and that is really important. I mean, I've noticed on the Zoom shows I've been doing, people just feel so much better for being with other people, even if it isn't in the same room. So digital has a lot to play, but I think it has to be about connecting people, and not just about manipulating people and sending them tropes and whatever you call memes. The words wrong. Memes.
I think they amount to the same thing, don't they? Yes, yeah. You're right. And just finally, what are your thoughts on the government presently? Because mine are largely unbroadcastable or unprintable. But what is your kind of guttural response to the politics that we're in?
Well, I mean, the government they're not doing a good job of it. They're definitely not doing a good job of it. I have to say, we have to come up with an opposition to it, which means coming up with solid proposals for what we would do. And we have to say, not try and play it safe. We have to be more robust in our response, because not doing that allows them to get away with saying, well, you didn't say anything at the time. So we get back into the situation we had in 2010, where Labour didn't say much about austerity for a while, to the point that they could then say, well, you didn't say anything about that then, so Labour was forced to carry on that policy.
And yet we seem to be heading into an even greater period of almost enforced inevitable austerity now, with a very right-wing Tory government in place, massive spending that's gone on in largely the wrong direction during the pandemic. And now we're going to be faced, undoubtedly, as we come out of the end of the pandemic fear period, we're going to be faced with all kinds of financial strictures that are going to impact us. What should Labour's response be to that?
Well, I think we should look at a vision of what we would have after the pandemic. With Brexit on top of what we've got here, it seems to me localism is what's going to be the future. We're going to have to be self-sufficient locally. If Brexit is put through, especially, supply chains aren't going to be there. We won't be able to buy cheap produce from abroad. We'd have to make our own. I've looked at some of the stuff Ed Miliband has put out just as a press release kind of thing. It's good, but I think there should be some more about how we improve our agriculture here. I think we could become self-sufficient in many ways if we did improve that. I mean, there's lots of farmland, there's lots of agriculture that isn't being used effectively. And people are going hungry. I mean, that's the bottom line here. People are going to be starving when the furlough ends and they lose their work, and then we've already got food banks that are oversubscribed. We're going to have to look at how we produce food. The picking of crops and stuff, that's the problem as well. That has to be looked at. I think food's really important, though.
I completely agree. Food security, very vital. Energy security too. I mean, we could easily be self-sufficient in energy if we had significant investment in renewables over the next 10 or 15 years, and we wouldn't be so dependent upon fossil fuels for our production, which would be great. What do you think we need to do for our young people? Because that's a big worry. They've been out of school. That's a short-term problem that can be overcome. But young people are facing a period now where they're going to grow up in an environment where it is going to be worse for them than it was for us in our lifetime with the economic position. How are we going to approach that?
Well, I mean, I can only see it in the sort of New Deal, Roosevelt type scenario where we have to just make things, we have to build this country up. I mean, the other thing I really do feel strongly about is the transport infrastructure needs to be invested in. We could rebuild the railways. Lots of those lines are still there. Since the 60s, when they were all, I mean, some of the areas of the country that are rural have no railway at all, and they can't get around. I mean, I've been to Cumbria. There's no rail links there. If you had a railway line between, say, Penrith and the coast, that would be a really profitable line, but it's not there. And it's ecologically better to have railways as well. I mean, if we spent money on investing in the railways, that would produce lots of work for people, and it would bring those rural towns into, their businesses would profit from that as well. So I don't see why we can't talk about that. I mean, HS2 might be a great way of speeding up getting from the south to the north, but we have to bring rural communities into play. Some of these places can't get around. Some people can't drive. So how do they get from one place to another? There are things like the railways and agriculture. I mean, that's just two areas that I see, but like you say, renewables, and there's a lot that needs to be done. And if we invest in it, then we'll be improving our lives, but also giving people jobs and making the economy, rebuilding the economy. I mean, because people have money to spend and etc. The Keynesian effect of that.
So if you've got one clear message at the end of this, and thanks for your time today, for Keir Starmer and his team, what is your message to the new Labour leadership?
I would say to Keir Starmer and his team that they should try to genuinely distribute power to local parties and allow the grassroots to flourish. Otherwise, it's a gamble that you might not win in a head-to-head with the Tories, where they dominate the media, and you've just got to hope Johnson nosedives. It's a real gamble. If you build from the bottom, you can't really go wrong.
That's a great message. Thank you very much for your time today, Crispin. Good luck with everything, and we'll come back and chat to you again soon for another update from your brilliant wisdom. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Phil.